They already drafted their questions. They are serious. Hi, everyone. We are moving on to the next panel, which is freedom of access to information and digital rights. So the panel will be moderated by Modu S. Juve, the Secretary General of the Gambia Press Union. Mr. Juve, you can go on.
Good morning. I hope all my panelists are in already. Okay. I am Mode S. Juve. I am the Secretary General of the Gambia Press Union. And I'm also a freelance journalist with Bloomberg News. I would like to stand on existing protocols and to extend greetings to everyone here present, including members of the panel for this session on access to information and digital rights. It's a pleasure, and which is a very important panel. Access to information is a right to fundamental rights of freedom of expression, as recognized by Article 19 of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. While digital rights refers to access and use computers and other electronic devices on telecommunication networks, digital rights are related to the protection and realization of existing human rights, including the right to privacy and freedom of expression in the context of digital technologies and the internet. The UN Human Rights Council had in 2012 and in 2014 and 2016 agreed that the same rights that people have offline that they enjoy online should also be protected online, and the council also went on to declare access to information or access to the internet as a human right. So this will form the basis of our discussion today for this session and in the Gambia. On that note, I would like to call on the panelists to come to the high table here. Mr. Demba Kande is a media specialist for Freedom House, the Gambia. Demba is also a journalist and has been in practice for a very long time and a researcher on media affairs. I would also like to call on Barrister Mohamed Bissou. Bissou is an expert on access to information legislation, and he actually participated in the drafting of the Access to Information Act 2021. He is here in his personal capacity as an expert on ATI, but he is also a senior lawyer at the Ministry of Justice. The third panelist that we will have is Mr. Aliou Badraso. He's the country coordinator for Give One project, and they have been working on a lot on issues related to digital rights and advocacy on net neutrality and creating digital literacy around the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome. These are the panelists that we have today for this particular session. And we will just go straight because we're starting late for this session. And we'll start the discussion immediately. And I would like to throw a few questions to the panelists initially for them to discuss for each up to 3 minutes on these issues. And we'll start with Demba. And if you can kindly give us an overview of access to information and digital rights as it relates, especially to the rights of journalists, but extend that to the rights of Gambians.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Modu, and thank you for having me. Overall, I think in terms of access to information, it's good to start with the fact that we have an access to information law, passed by the National Assembly in July 2021 and assented to by the President in August of the same year. It's a very good law overall. It provides the basic requirements for accessing public information for everyone, Gambians and non-Gambians alike. I stand to be corrected, but overall, it provides the legal framework for accessing public information. There's this notion that the law is not yet in effect because of the fact that the Information Commission that should be established under the law is not yet set up. But I think that's misunderstanding. The law is in effect since 2021, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I think a lot of interpretations are concerned. That's the foundation. Now, in terms of the legal framework, in terms of practice, the law set forward a lot of fundamental requirements, one of which is the need for what is referred to as proactive disclosure, and it's where public institutions and relevant private bodies are encouraged to share information that is of public interest to the population, even before they request for this information. At the very basic, we expect all public institutions and relevant private bodies to have functional websites where they disseminate information that is of interest to all of us, including journalists. Is this happening? Yes. To what extent? It's not. I mean, to some extent, yes, and it's not to the extent that we would love to see it happen. There are some few good examples of this within the public sector and a few in the private sector, but there is a lot more that needs to be done in terms of access to information. Or in terms of the digital rights framework in the Gambia, it's safe to say that if we compare to the 22 years of the Jammeh government, there's been a serious improvement in terms of the enjoyment of fundamental rights online and offline. Yes, most of you would know that under Jammeh there used to be, massive numbers of people being arrested for merely expressing themselves offline and online. The numbers have gone down significantly on the barrel or since 2017. But unfortunately, they have not disappeared completely. We still have, isolated cases. I say isolated. I mean, we still have a few cases of, arrest for expressions online. So which threatens the rights of individual users. We have issues around, data governance. We still have challenges in terms of the regulatory framework for data protection. There are efforts afoot, I know, and I'm sure Ali will talk about that in a bit more, in terms of the regulatory framework, but there are still gaps in that area as well. Awesome. Thank you.
We will delve more into these issues. I would like to call on Barrister Mohamed Bissou. Demba did talk about aspects of the access to information law and the rights that is offered to Gambians. Can you give us a bit more detail on what the law is about?
Thank you, Modu. So the whole essence of access to information law is that it recognizes the fact that members of the public, that is Gambians and non-Gambians alike, have a right to access any information that is held by public authorities. The definition is extended to situations where even private entities that deal with government and either by way of contracts, or if they are funded, by government, or if the operation involves use of public funds, even though they are private, for the purpose of access to information law, they become a public body in that context. So members of the public can walk in there and request for information. Of course, what the law also has done is that it has identified information that cannot be given out. For example, information relating to national security or international affairs and so on. But again, the law has clearly outlined the instances in which that information can be refused. So it's not. It tries to avoid a situation where government would just classify every information to say this information cannot be given out. But the law has given out a benchmark to say, well, this information can be given, that information cannot be given. But overall, even with that exemption, the Act goes further to say if giving out that information, which is, let's say it's national security, if it is in the interest of the public, then the information must be given out. So access to information law is about public interest at all times, because the rationale behind the legislation is that whatever information that government has, it belongs to the people. So if I own something like a bank, I have my money in a bank. If I go to the bank to get my money back, the bank has no business to tell me how I want to use my money. So that is what access to information is about. The information that government has, how citizens are going to use it, it's not the business of the government. You are not required to even provide a justification as to why you need a document. Let's say, for example, I walk into Ministry of Finance and tell them, I want to see your contracts that you have signed for 2021. The PS has no business to tell me. I mean, that is what the law is saying. The PS has no business to tell me, what are you going to do those contracts? What are you going to do with them? So it ensures that government is held accountable. Let's say, for example, the road construction that is ongoing right now. Citizens have a right to go and ask government, you said you were spending 10 million on this. We want to see the invoices. We want to see the contracts. We want to see the receipts. Because at the end of the day, it's public funds, right? So that is what access to information the law talks about. And it has also anticipated the creation of an entity called the Information Commission. The Information Commission is responsible for enforcement of the law, but unfortunately it has not been established. So that is one of the challenges that we will discuss later on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sow. And we'll discuss more about the role of the Information Commission and other aspects or rights that are provided for under the Access to Information Act. Mr. Sow, I'm coming to you, and your organization works a lot around advocacy centered around net neutrality. What is this idea, and how does it further the enjoyment of digital rights?
Thank you very much, Mr. Juve. Like you said, with the Given project, we've been doing this advocacy for some time now. I know we all remember during 2016, prior to 2016 presidential election, when we started having internet issues, people started downloading VPNs. I know still a lot of people struggle to understand what these things are, because it was something that was never heard of before, and then we just had internet shutdown prior to 2016, and then after that, we still continue to have network disruptions here and there due to excuses that comes out. The ACE cable is having issues here and there. So when you look at net neutrality, it's like no one should block any internet access to anyone based on their locations or status. But if you look around in the Gambia, sometimes you even within certain situations, you will have pockets where the internet is very slow. You move to other places. So it's incumbent upon ISP providers to provide equal access to everyone. And if you look at things in the Gambia, internet penetration is still very low compared to other countries. And this goes to also cost of internet in the country is very expensive. So when you look at if you look at access to information, like literally everything we used to do offline is now transferred online. So most of the informations that we access are basically online. And if you look at the law that we're talking about here, it's like asking government and other public institutions to have websites where the public can have access to information. So we have that intersection that the informations that we seeking are mostly available online, and it's easier to achieve to get those informations online. Demba talked about some of the issues when it comes to people giving out certain information online, and then the government is not happy with them. We still have some of those laws that are happening. And the good thing about the access to information law is it with issues relating to the official secret, and the one that was amended in I think 2008 or something. This law was there like more than 100 years ago, since the colonial days, which government has been using not to give information out. I remember when the president's food budget was out online, there was a lot of commotions about it. These are public information. It's not coming from the president's pocket. This is the taxpayers' money. But then if we didn't have an access to information law, this could be seen as a state secret that the person who leaked this information could be charged based on that 100-year-old law in the country. So I think it's a good news. It's like we have this law, and as time goes on, hopefully a lot of people will understand, a lot of public officials handling public information would know this law is here for the people, and then they would be respecting it.
Thank you so much. But you can still go ahead. So we go back to them. For what is will definitely open the floor for questions and comments after the next round of questions to the panel. Okay. Yeah. So we go back to Demba, and you've worked a lot on issues around internet freedom, and have actually made written for several years the state of internet freedom in the Gambia. You've briefly talked about this when you made your opening statement, but we'll just want you to elaborate more and compare what it was like previously and the current state of internet freedom, and where you have numbers also you can help with that.
Thank you. Overall, we can look at internet freedom on the three broad categories. One is access to internet. Under that, we look at how many people have access to internet, and certainly over the years, the numbers has gone up. Back in 2017, 2016, 2017, we had about 20 to 25% of the population on the internet. As of January 2023, that number is around 50 something, depending on which source you're looking at. If you look at it in Pura, they'll put it at 65 to 80% of the population. But that's a separate discussion. The point here is that there's been remarkable improvement in terms of access. Notwithstanding, an important component is the cost of internet. The Gambia is still one of the countries with the highest cost of internet in the sub-region. In policy, we are the cheapest country, or one of the cheapest in the sub-region, but in practice, it's really expensive. Even if you compare to our immediate neighbor, what you will spend on internet maybe for one day would be equivalent to what someone in Senegal will spend on internet for a whole week. And dare I say, the quality of service is very, very different. Our internet speed is very bad, and you know the cost of electricity and all of that, cost of gadgets, all of that have a direct impact on the accessibility of the internet to the average person. Then we have the issue of legal protections. I talked about this a little bit earlier on, but another important component is the fact that in 2013, the President Jammeh amended the law to include very harsh punishments for freedom of expressions online, particularly, and this includes imprisonment terms of up to 15 years and a $5 million fine and so on and so forth. However, in 2018, the Supreme Court, declared that ruling is unconstitutional. But I'm not a lawyer, and I'm glad we have a lawyer in the building, or we have some lawyers in the building. That law has not been repealed yet. The Supreme Court ruling is there. The amendments are there, and the Constitution. The Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional, but it's still in the law box. I don't know what that means, but I feel much safer if we removed it in the law box. A lot of other, regulatory frameworks. Now, if I move to violation of user rights specifically, which is the third category, I talked about the fact that in the past we had numbers, websites were blocked. Over 30 websites in the Gambia were blocked. Now, luckily for us, we don't have any known website, especially in terms of websites that are focused on, serious public discourse blocked in the Gambia. In the past, Freedom newspaper, Gainako.com, and a lot of other, public interest websites were blocked, and including WhatsApp and Barada talked about the fact that we had to use VPNs to have access to some of those platforms. Today, that doesn't exist. Notwithstanding, we still have issues around violation of user rights for the fact that we have seen people have been prosecuted for sharing information on WhatsApp platforms, for quote-unquote leaking public information, and so on and so on. We've also seen threats of violence against these individual users. So this is kind of like a comparison between what used to obtain and what's happening now. So sort of my advice is that we need to be more vigilant and be more proactive in terms of demanding our individual user rights and demanding a more secure and safe open internet for everyone.
Thank you so much, Demba. And Mohammed, if you can elaborate a bit on that, when a law is declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, but it's still in our law books, what does the state have to do? And is it in any way, or can it in any way impede, people's access to the internet or people's rights to enjoy those freedoms? But then you can go on and speak about the local instruments that we have in the Gambia that promotes access to information and digital rights.
Just to address Demba's concern, the Supreme Court under our Constitution is the only platform or the institution that is mandated to strike down any law that is unconstitutional. So when the Supreme Court does that, it means that law no longer exists. Whether it's in the books or not, it doesn't exist. But what is expected is that ordinarily we expect the Ministry of Communication to go to the National Assembly and apply that particular provision be repealed. But that notwithstanding, the law has been struck down. It means no one can be charged for violating that provision because the law does not exist. So that is the effect of it. Now, on the second part of your question, the local instruments in Gambia, let's say legal instruments that deal with access to information, the first instrument is the Constitution. The Constitution has a provision on freedom of expression and access to information. But if you look at the provision of the Constitution, it's not as expansive as it is. It only says everyone has a right to freedom of expression, which also includes, of course, the right to receive information. That's why it stopped. But how information should be accessed, the manner in which it should be done, what is the time frame to receive information and who to receive information from is absent. So in 2021, we had the Access to Information Act, which is the second legal instrument on access to information. It's a more expansive provision of the Constitution dealing with access to information. So this law, like Damba said, there's a misconception around it. People said it's not in effect. No, but as of November 2021, the law came into effect. So there is no excuse to say access to information law is not in force. It is in force, right? So the access to information law is the main legislation, the key legislation on access to information in the Gambia. It outlines how one can access information from public bodies. It outlines the obligation on public bodies to ensure that information is accessed by members of the public. And the beauty about it is that it says members of the public, so it does not say Gambians. So it means Gambians and both Gambians and non-Gambians have a right to access information in the Gambia. In fact, that is the international standard. If you go to other countries, they limit the right to only citizens. But our law is among the top 10 in the world. Let me just say that. That is, the access to information law is among the top 10 in time when it comes to access to information, because there is a rating, international rating. So we're within the first 10. Again, you will find access to information in some legislations, but not very extensively. For example, in the National Environment and Management Act, which deals with environment, there is a provision which says everyone in the Gambia has a right to information as regards, the environment. That is important because, over the years, environmental challenges has become an issue, and it's still an issue in the Gambia, whether it is natural resources, including land, fisheries, mining, and so on. So it's a huge concern. So this law has been there since 1994. That is why for any environmental, any project that one does that has an impact on the environment, you are required to carry out an environmental impact assessment. And in that part, the members of the public have to be involved. But unfortunately, that has not been the case. For example, the road construction that is ongoing. You have compounds around this end. Have they been contacted? The dust, have you contacted them and talked to them about the impact of this project and the dust that is going to cause, the likely health effect? So that law is there, but how many of us are aware of it? right? So you have a lot of environmental issues. You go to Combo South and fish mills have been established. I mean, how are our people involved in the establishment of those fish mills? Because it's going to affect their livelihood. So those laws exist, but there is one thing having a law and another thing the enforcement. So these are some of the legal local instruments that we have in the Gambia that we can rely on when it comes to access to information.
Thank you so much. And also, you may talk briefly about the Evidence Act. I think for some of us journalists, we use it to access company records at the registry. Yeah.
Well, now with the coming of the access to information law, you can access any information that is held by government officials, so far as it is not within the exemptions. But company records are public records. Without even losing the Access to Information Act, the Companies Act itself makes it a requirement that you can make a request for information. Of course, you need to pay a fee in doing so. I think you pay 500 to access those records. But it's not only limited to the Companies Act. Even the courts, you can go to a court. If you need a court record, you need a judgment, you can apply and it will be given to you. One thing is access, another thing is its availability. But one thing important that I need to highlight about access to information is that we all know Gambia has a problem with records keeping. But this law now has made an obligation on government institutions to keep their records in order. If you fail to do so, it's a crime. And the violation of which you are liable to pay $50,000. So money will be provided to institutions, and they have no excuse to say we don't have proper records management.
Thank you so much. Just, Mr. So, before I come to you, a quick announcement. The owner of the vehicle number NBR 0798A is blocking someone who wants to leave. So you may please go and address that. NBR 0798A. Thank you so much. Mr. So, Demba did briefly talk about the cost of access to the internet. I want to believe your organization also in your advocacy as part of net neutrality issues would deal with issues on the cost of the internet. Why is it so important that internet is affordable for the people?
Yesterday we talked about this here, like how ICT is a serious development enabler for any serious country. The director spoke about like how even in the Gambia, one of the biggest tax-paying company is an ICT company. Like we talked about Nigeria, how ICT is bringing in more revenue than oil. So it's the same as Gambia. Like everything, like I said, we used to do offline is being transferred online. And now we've seen how the internet is just enabling access to information. And when the cost is high, people struggle with it. Like if you look at the purchasing power of Gambians, what is the basic salary in the country compared to the cost of internet in this country? It's well affordable. Like we talk about 1.5 gigabyte or whatever of like let's say one company is like 270 or 260. How many Gambians earn that in a day? And then we depend on the internet for literally everything. Even the grandmas in the village, they rely on WhatsApp group for information. Something would happen here, the next minute someone in Basse or even a remote village in the Gambia would have to rely on that. So if we don't have like access to cheaper internet or even affordability, accessibility, it's gonna be an issue because a lot of people will be deprived from the opportunities available online. Like yesterday, we talked about the realities that the COVID-19 exposed, because some of the private schools who could afford were still going to school, having access to online classes and everything. But majority of the Gambia go to the rural areas, they missed out on this opportunity. Like the unrealistic thing that we saw was the TV lectures that they were doing. We even saw the president miss out on a very important ECOWAS or AU meeting because of internet connectivity in the country. So if a president can struggle based on that, something that we didn't even foresee, how about the regular Gambians? But you know, there are so many components to this. Gambia, I think we rely mostly on the ACE cable, which every time they will tell us one of the fishing trawlers like caught it somewhere. So when you look at Senegal and other countries, they have access to a lot of cables. You know, I hope we can have more investment. Hopefully Gambia have a second cable, and then, you know, more investment where telcos, they reduce maybe tax, I don't know, that component, that they can have more they can reach more Gambians, and then the internet can be cheaper and accessible to a lot of Gambians, because the opportunities online, they're just endless, that a lot of Gambians are missing out due to costs and accessibility.
Thank you so much for that. I think by now we must have laid the ground for the main theme and the idea that we're discussing today. And at this point, we are almost about half an hour into this session, and I would like to get some feedback from the floor in the form of questions and comments. So we'll take, I think, at most 4. When you are raising a question or a comment, you can please state your name and institution or designation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Khadijatu Job, a student from St. Joseph, basically in grade 11. So the question I want to ask is for Mr. Demba. You said the Gambia has a high cost of internet. We all agree, right? So what are the plans going up to reduce the cost? Mostly, we students are the ones suffering, or even work areas across the region. We spend a lot of money buying data to do assignment or researches, even though it's high in cost. But we keep on buying. For example, we all students mostly have like $100 a lunch or 75. If we buy an amount of credit like $50, it will not even stay long. To be honest, that $50 can be used for another thing more than internet. And for us students, we need justice for this, real. So what can you say about this? Yes.
Wow. What do I say? Justice for access to internet, yeah. It's a very, very important question. Unfortunately, I can't speak to what the plans are. I can speak to what could be done in terms of helping reduce the cost of internet. One of those is cost of equipment, you know, in terms of facilities providing electricity, for instance. It's one thing, the infrastructure, and the other bit is, especially in terms of the infrastructure, we see a lot of the service providers, especially the GSM companies, which I assume many students rely on for internet, is the fact that each service provider builds their own infrastructure and maintains it. That's really expensive. So if they spend so much money on that, they'll have to transfer that cost to you and I, you know, as the final users. So one thing that could be done is what we refer to as cost sharing. So instead of Gamtel, Gamcell, QCell, Africell, and all the other service providers, each building their own towers and transmission centers, they could build one tower and then share the cost of maintaining it over time. That's one thing. And I think this is somehow provided for in the Information and Communication Act. I don't know to what extent they've, especially PURA, this falls broadly on the mandate of PURA. I don't know to what extent they have, they work towards implementing this, but this is an important step in terms of helping reduce the cost of internet. The other bit is, I think this is, Gambia is a tax economy. There's a lot of taxes that are imposed on ICT services. And I think, as somebody mentioned, the government will tell you that the ICT subsector is the biggest contributor to the tax in this country as we speak. So I'm not saying this will reduce tax, but to think of how do we ensure that the tax collection that they're doing on ICTs does not have a direct impact on the cost on the average user, because as individuals, the important thing. And certainly, the cost is one thing. The other issue is also in terms of the quality of services. And there should be some form of monitoring in terms of, regulating the cost, but also monitoring of the cost of services. Because it's one thing to say that you should sell this paper for $1, say, is another thing to ensure that you're indeed selling this paper for $1, say. And that's something that the regulator or the regulatory body should also pay attention to in terms of enabling, lowering the cost of internet in the Gambia.
I think we need more cables. I don't know why we don't have Amadou again to talk about these things, how we're missing out on most of these opportunities. Because Gambia, the main cable that we have is the ACE cable. When the ACE cable is down, I don't know whoever, I always joke about this, whoever is making commission from that deal, the orange, the backup is killing us. Like, we need more cables, but I know it's more like investment. The last time we had Sal here, he was talking about it's more like it's been run like a cartel. I think the government should be very serious when it comes to these things. We have all these Google and Facebook cables coming up to Senegal, and then we're missing out. We need to have this serious conversation and the right investment, because if not, it's just going up and up and up. And like all the things that Demba said are very important. Hopefully, someday we can have the political leadership to look into these things, to know the importance of all these things.
A quick one more to be. Point is that as users, we should demand for quality services. It's not enough for us just to sit back and say we want this, we want it. But let's come out. Justice for data or quality. We see people all over the world protesting. I'm not saying go out and destroy stuff, but let those in authority know that this is what we want, this is what we're demanding for. It's a basic things in a peaceful and very responsible manner. We can do that. If we put a lot of pressure on them, the cost of internet will likely go down. Thank you.
We'll take another question.
Okay. Thank you very much. I basically don't have a question. What I have is a recommendation particularly to the high school students. Like my sister made mention of the high cost of internet. Yes, it's very true. But I will advise them, it's a recommendation to them, let them make use of our libraries, our national libraries, in terms of assignments. Back in the days when I was in grade 12, that was year 2012, most of our assignments, we have to go to the library and read books to find out, to answer our assignment. Unlike today. No, calm down. Internet, I know internet is very important. We do our researches on the internet, but as a high school student, it's very key, it's very important you go to the library, search for books, open books, read, and then get your assignments done. It's more effective and it gives quality education than going into the internet reading.
Please, let's allow him. If you have counter questions, you can.
No, this is just a recommendation. I am not saying this is what's supposed to be done, but it's also important that you go to the library when you don't have internet.
Okay. We'll take another question.
Please, Mr. Chairman, you can choose from the. It's difficult to give the mic. You decide who do we give.
The lady in scarf here.
Me?
Behind you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Awakebe, and I am an intern at the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Welfare. So I have a question to the Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Information. Like, we all know that the internet is one of the most important tools that we use for getting information and connectivity. Like, nowadays we see youths, they're so much into the internet, like it can cause harm, and at some point if you utilize it, it can cause good. So I have a question. The question is, what are some of the restriction that the government are taking so that our youths are not so much deep into the internet? Like, for example, the use of TikTok and other means. We can see that kids nowadays are so much into this TikTok that they're exposing themselves and all that. I'm not saying the government should ban TikTok, but there are some rules and restrictions that need to be taken so that we can limit ourselves and know how to use it and all that. So that we don't want our future leaders tomorrow to be like this, like how everything is going. Thank you very much.
I think any one of you in the panel can just discuss this question.
Well, for me as a lawyer, I mean, the use of internet is a matter of freedom of expression. You can only limit it if the law said it should be limited, and there are limits to exercising one's right to freedom of expression. When it comes to children, the primary responsibility is not the state, but the parents. Of course, the state has a duty to some extent. The state has a duty to some extent, but parents are the first to control and have an oversight over your children. Because even in law, if a parent fails in its or responsibility towards a child, that particular parent can be charged for neglecting your child. So children using internet, I mean, that is something that parents really have to take care of. Government cannot come and limit your right to enjoy internet, because the moment you do so, people will start saying our government has been dictatorial. I mean, that's the history we've had for the past, during the Jammeh regime, and that was bad for us, right? But so the responsibility for me, in my personal view, not saying that is the government's position, but I'm saying, in my view, parents have to take that obligation to ensure that they have that oversight, I mean, towards their children with the use of internet. But if government wants to restrict the use of TikTok, the following day you would see that people will sue government to court. But they can't, because the law allows everyone to enjoy that level of freedom of expression.
I agree with everything that you said. In addition, I think there is also need for sensitization. We need to do a lot more. I know that Kifuan and a lot of other CSOs are working in this area. So it's not just government, but CSOs and other, individuals, the media, and everybody should focus on this. Education, there's necessity to focus on education, and there's need for us to bring in ICT at a very early level in terms of the education system. And last but not the least, service providers should be encouraged to provide built-in safety protocols for most of the services and products that we use. And that, again, is an issue that we as users must recognize and
We'll take another question. From that end, the man with the
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I am Alhaji Mane, a professional development coach at Smart Consultancy. Policy mechanisms that are in place to ensure people clearly understand these policies, especially at the local community level, where our local languages could be used to ensure everybody, even the grandmothers, understand some of these laws. So what are some of the mechanisms placed to ensure it is being understood by everyone? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think Gambia Press Union, I mean, being the forerunners in the coming of this, in promoting access to information, have started advocacy programs. I was just talking to Juve not long ago. They have programs that would would enable them to go to the provinces to discuss with the people. Because I remember when the whole conversation started, there was a caravan that went around the country to talk to the people about access to information. It was really welcoming. So conversations are still ongoing. GPU has radio programs that are ongoing in relation to access to information. But it's also our collective responsibility, especially some of us who are educated and we have our parents home. We need to rice field 6 years and on. Know who this project contractor is, and everything is at a standstill. So imagine if they have access to information. We're asking the Minister of Agriculture, why is the money that you said you're pumping into these rice fields? So again, we need to take these conversations back to our houses and discuss with our people. Because certainly the concept we have in the Gambia, and that is a problem that we have to recognize with access to information, is that we always think Mansakunda is right. Whatever Mansakunda means, right? But that is a mindset we need to change, right? Because if the moment they're hiding information from you, it means they're hiding something that they're doing wrong. But if you freely give out information, what harm will it do to you? I mean, as a government or as an institution. So us, the young people, need to lead that conversation. We need to lead that change and make our people understand that you have a right to know whatever is being done in your village. I mean, for me, I think that is the way forward. Yeah.
And I think another problem that access to information helps solve is this fake news that we see all over the place. Because if there is a blockage of information, obviously it gives rise to misinformation and there's fake news. What Mr. So said, like, it's important that everyone takes that personal leading role in your own capacity. I know CSOs are those are here and there, but when citizens are informed, you counter them, they come and say, oh, it was misquoted and things like that. But because if citizens don't know, anybody that it favors without integrity would always use it to their advantage, and this would be at the detriment of society.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to you. We know a lot of people want to ask questions, but we'll come back to you. But very quickly, back to the panel. And we can talk briefly about this for the sake of time. Demba, Ali, we just talked about the issue of fake news. Why is access to information so important, and how can we use it to address the issue of misinformation, disinformation, and even to an extent malinformation?
That's a very important one. Because of lack of information, people then, this kind of an environment will allow rumors to thrive. And very often we see, what we see is, hearsay. But if, for instance, we, on our individual and institutional responsibilities, actively access to information law recommends, which is proactively disclose information of public interest to the population, then there's no room for doubt, there's no room for rumors, and as a result, it sort of creates sort of an environment where people have access to all the information that they need, or if not most of the information that they need. And the principle of openness, the principle of being accountable and responsible, also demands that when people come to your office and request for public information, that you're ready and willing to share that information. It is only the absence of that will create an environment where people will start, speculating. I mean, we are all familiar with, the Wednesday news of a particular, platform that, thrives a lot on rumors very often. But, this is also sometimes meant to push, public institutions particularly to come out and clarify and provide more information to the population. And this, in a way, helps improve the information landscape in a way that will reduce misinformation, malinformation, but also create quality content for individuals, especially the population, to make informed decisions.
Barrister, I would want you to talk about access to information in relation to social and economic rights, whether it's right to health or those related rights. How does our own law helps in the enjoyment of these rights?
With our current law, every information that government has is subject to access to information, except of course the exceptions. For example, I gave issues about national security. And what is national security? Issues about our military tactics, how military operations are to be conducted, issues about investigation of crimes, issues about cabinet discussions, personal information. Of course, my health information cannot be subject of access to information. But in terms of promoting social rights, for example, let's assume that a government institution says, I'm going to start a budget to build a hospital. The project that is approved is $5 million. The contractor goes and construct that hospital, and even you as a non-contractor, you look at the building and say, well, this is even 500,000 is not spent on this building. It happens in some government projects. Access to information would give the members of that community to now ask the Ministry of Health, for example, to say, can you give us the contract? In fact, we want to see the contract, we want to see the invoices, we want to see the materials that you have bought, we want to see the BOQ. So you are able to look at these documents and assess, right, to see whether, in fact, this $5 million that was approved by National Assembly for the project has been spent well or not. So it's a measure of curbing corruption, because then you would know, oh, we've given these people $5 million, but they only spent 500,000. Where is the remaining 4.5? So it provides that basis for people to now look at government to say whether they are transparent or not. So your public funds will be spent accordingly, because that officer who knows that if I am if I don't do it right, the public will come and say this man is corrupt. Nobody would do it. So the country would really go on a right direction.
Ali, you can speak to us about creating awareness on digital rights, which your organization has been working on. But what more could be done to ensure that the Gambian population or residents of the Gambia are very much aware of these rights?
I think everything starts from the bottom up. If you want it to be successful, we have various approaches, but our education system to start with, sometimes it's easy to build children than orient elderly people. So when we include this digital right education in our school curriculum from an early age, it will definitely help solve a lot of problems in this country. If you see, digital literacy is very low here. We just get consumed in these gadgets and everything at a certain age because we need it. But if we start having computer literacies from an early age, how many schools have computer labs in this country? Like you see, like a grown-up will go finish high school and they will be like, I'm going to study computer for 3 months. Like, what for? This thing should have, like, kids, you go to other countries, kids use these gadgets as early as when they just start walking or talking. So our government should definitely look into this. I know private sectors are trying to do their best. In fact, if you look at most of the institutions available are private owned. But the government should be serious when we want to talk about development. I know all these nice things that they promise us about certain policies that we're doing, certain development agendas we're doing, but is that the
Thank you so much for that. We go back to the floor. We have 10 minutes left, and the panel wouldn't have an opportunity to make closing statements. I will give this to the audience. We'll take more questions here.
Thank you.
We can, if we are making a comment, we can keep it very short and a question straight to the point.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aju Olisamba, and my question is that as we rely more and more on technology and communication and access to information, the need for meaningful connectivity and digital rights protection becomes increasingly present with the rise of artificial intelligence and big data that is happening around the world. And we do not have these laws in place, and we have been having these same conversations every single time we're in these gatherings with regards to the data privacy bill and all the new innovations that are happening. My question is to council, to whose mercy are we at if some of these issues are happening? The police do not understand, the government is being slow. To whose mercy are we at?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly the criminals, because they would go after you. They would go and yeah, they certainly would do whatever they would, because they know there is no law in place. But for me, I throw back the question to civil society. You don't need to wait for government to bring laws. We've seen GPU did it with the access to information law. Government was reluctant. I mean, of course, internationally they went and said, oh, to their international partners, we'll bring this law. But they dragged their feet. GPU came and said, look, here is a draft, take it. Government was forced to accept it. It went to National Assembly and it got an A+. So civil society should also, we can have these engagements, they're important. But we must take a proactive responsibility, because the introduction of a law is yes, that's government's primary responsibility, but there's nothing that stops you from drafting your law, use your donor partners to force government, and the government accept it. So if we want to rely on government 100%, they have other things that they're worried about, but not issues about technology. We all know, we've all admitted since yesterday that we have a problem with that understanding. So the institutions, CSOs that are involved in this business really need to take things seriously. The conversation can continue, but we need concrete steps to ensure that these laws come into effect. If not, we are all at stake. We all have monies in banks. I know of an instance, because I'm a prosecutor, where one of our top lawyers, 1 million was taken from her account, just like that. What can you do about it? Nothing.
Thank you so much. We'll take a question from those participants who are joining us online. It's not available. While we try that technicality, we can go back to the floor here. And do we have any more questions? Yes. You wanted to ask a question earlier? Okay. Yes, please, you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fatima Bampia. My question is going to you, Mr. Demba. To my notice, it's been brought that GRTS, the Gambia First Radio and Television Service, has stopped covering industrial actions like strikes and protests, because they feel like this is kind of demoralizing the nation. But I feel like we have freedom of speech. If they are not going to cover this kind of news, how are people going to know what are we facing? Because if we can protest and it's not been published, then how are many going to know about it? And I believe GRTS, this is a news station that our grandparents, old people, Gambia at while listening to before QTV come.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Demba, you may respond.
Thank you. Yes, I saw the memo myself, that there was a memo on GRTS saying they will not cover any industrial action. I have to say that was under an old management, or a management that no longer exists. In principle, that's really bad in terms of press freedom, freedom of expression, and broader democratic principles. And especially is bad because GRTS is publicly funded. It's operates on cost of taxpayers' monies. You and I pay taxes, and that part of it is sent to GRTS to operate on. It violates in part the fundamental rights of individuals to be heard, but more importantly, it affects the diversity of opinions in the public space in terms of dissemination of information. I'm not sure this is in effect happening at GRTS right now, but if it is so, it's really bad. I hope that that decision is reversed as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much. We'll take a question online from participants online.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
You can hear me. Okay. Good afternoon from my end. Good morning to you all. I just wanted to make a contribution. It's not a question. It's in regards to the young lady that asked a question related to restrictions on internet and stuff like that. I just wanted to say, based on the principle of openness, since the internet was created and aligning with the vision of the internet society that builds up these things. The internet is open and is globally connected and secure and trustworthy. So when you look at those principles, I think you'll discover that it starts with you when it comes to self-regulation. So I'll give an example. We shouldn't see any school having an open-ended internet because it's a public school, you know. So there should be firewalls and restrictions on accessing certain features and stuff like that, whether it's pornography and other issues. And same thing too should apply to other agencies. So it's having policies in place, you know. And when we had a lot of magazines, people were not doing a lot of stuff online. You discover that you go to any major supermarket in the world and you were interested in buying an adult magazine, they were always in the top shelf, you know, so kids couldn't pick them and everything. Even today in TV with cable TV all over, there are restrictions that you do parental control. That's why the lawyer that spoke really said it rightly. It starts with the parents. So we have to understand that what might be good for one might be bad for the other. So the internet is there, and we should know that within safe.
Yeah.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Omar Mboub. I'm a mental health activist advocate and environmental activist advocate. So my question will go to the Freedom House regard to the accessible information. So are they are they also concerning those who are mental health and also those who cannot see their eyes?
Yeah, thank you so much. Demba, you may speak to.
Yeah, I will speak in a bit. I'll allow the lawyer to respond in a bit. But generally, I don't know. Freedom House, we focus a lot on governance, democracy, human rights, and in broadly speaking, coverage covers all human rights and does not provide for any discrimination based on anything, including minority rights. If we connect this to the issue of right to access of information, our access to information law is very, very progressive in that sense as well. It makes provisions for, people who are hard of hearing, people, blind, and so on and so forth. They're all provided for, and because in the sense that if you request for access, for instance, to a public institution, you can request for access in a format that is suitable to you, or that is, that you require. So if, for instance, my grandmother in the village who cannot read or write could request for a document and I'd say that record it in Polar for me, or record it in a language that I will understand and send it to me in a WhatsApp audio or something like that. But I think maybe you can elaborate more on that.
Yeah, you're right. In fact, what the law has done is to create the office of what you call information officer. It is the responsibility of the information officer to provide that assistance to someone with special needs. So it's the obligation on the public institution to provide that information. If I need the information in audio, it has a safeguard for persons with disability or anyone with special needs.
Thank you so much to all the former. We'll now have Amadou, please come forward.
We're going to have a very meaningful connectivity. I think for the past 2 days we have been talking about this in different panels, but today we will talk about it in details in this very important panel. And part of the panel, we're going to have CD Bensouda, the CEO of Insys Global. Can we put a round of applause for CD, please? And we will have a representative from the Gambia Competitive Commission and Consumer Protection, GCCPC. Can we have Mr. Babukar Sise? Let's put a round of applause for him. Unfortunately, we're supposed to have Gamtel and Pura in the panel, and we will have Dauda from the GMC SAD, who's supposed to step in for Pura. So we have the GCCPC guys, and also we have CD Bensouda. CD was the president of the Gambia Information. You come in terms of ICT ecosystem, mentors in the ecosystem. And I believe we're going to have a very interesting and engaging panel here that is doing extremely well into the market. I think it's one of the youngest ISPs that has gone as far as up to Basse is concerned. So GCCPC, Mr. Babukar, they're more of protecting consumer rights. If we have issues, you buy something from the shop for that to end, so they stand for the consumers. So to start with, universal access and meaningful connectivity. My first question will go to CD as the CEO of Insys Global and also a member of the Serekunda Internet Exchange, 6P. Are we really on track as far as universal access is concerned and connectivity in the Gambia?
Okay, all right. I think it's still good afternoon. Huh? Yes. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the warm introduction. And it's actually the CEO is Dr. George Ondul Tambedu, who I think some of you have already met or may have engaged with in the past. Now, InsysNet's primary focus is on providing internet connectivity, and it was a spin-off. Primary focus right now is the GBA, which is Banjul, Bilkama, and KMC. Now, going back to your I think that I don't know what the average age here is, but I think it's quite young. But in 2016, post the dictatorship era, there was pre-dictatorship, there was a lot of restriction on internet access, and the ACE consortium, the ACE submarine cable, was founded during a dictatorship, and as a consequence of that, the primary goal in a lot of ways was not achieved, which actually one of the focus of the World Bank investing funds into the ACE submarine cable. Post 2016, specifically led by actually break this monopoly on the ACE submarine system, which is the primary internet gateway for Gambia. And this was successfully achieved in 2018 when, for the first system, at more or less the same rates as other operators. And in 2018, I don't know if a lot of you have realized, but in 2018, that was around 1 megabit per second for around $4,000 per month. That was the prevailing internet package pre-2018 of August. Post-2018, the cheapest internet tariff became 5 meg for $2,500 a month. So there was a dramatic change in terms of internet prices. And since then, they've continued to come down. Now, there's over the course of this conversation, but and these are real conversations that we need to have. One of them is the cost of infrastructure. A typical base station are actually very expensive to deploy. Now, imagine if you're supposed to have 100 antennas to cover the length and breadth of the country. That's a lot of money, right? As I mean, roughly 200 million, right? Now, on top of that, these base stations actually have wear and tear over time. So there's a cost to actually maintaining that in-transit capacity that all have to be paid, a lot of it in foreign currency, for internet connectivity to remain consistent. Now, this cost has to be put in by somebody. Now, that somebody obviously has to have a return on investment. Now, this return on investment is important for two things. One, you need to be able to repair. Two, you need to be able to upgrade. The second is that there is still to date quite a bit of government intervention in the telecom space. Now, this does have a negative, ultimately it does have a net negative consequence. Now, let's take an example. Government does own, now Gamtel will say that our mandate is to be able to connect every Gambian to the internet. But to date, you find that most people do not connect through Gamtel to the internet. They prefer to connect through the private sector operators. Why? I bet you if I ask around this room, a lot of people will come up with different reasons why. And those reasons are all quite valid. But you find that when state enterprise is involved in a certain enterprise, right, it ultimately creates problem. A good example is recently NAREC. I mean, NAREC has increased tariffs. Everybody in this room is saying, give us a justification for why. NAREC is saying, if we don't do it, we're going to run out of money and we will not be able to supply electricity. But at its core, there's an issue of efficiency to make a profit. In that process, what also happens is that there's greater efficiency and better service delivery, and there's healthy competition. Now, when government interferes, right, and they now create an imbalance. Now, let's go back to the case of Gamtel. A restriction right now. INET can't run fiber. We have to use Gamtel infrastructure. That sector by the non-commercial participation in that sector. Now, that has been done, yet the majority of Gambians still prefer to use a private operator. So you find that market forces. Now, going back to my question, if I build a base station, right, in a community where only 10 people can access, will that base station ever generate a return on investment? No, right? But what will actually happen is that that base station in Dar es Salaam, exactly, right? That creates a problem. I deploy resources and somebody else pays for the cost. So in other words, it's not that we should not connect Dar es Salaam, is that we need to look at the area where it's needed, but also managing and maintaining cost, right? But also, because government has seen that the biggest sector is telecom, right? The telecom sector, not ICT. Now, we must be careful here. When government says that the biggest company in Gambia is an ICT, and I would like us to touch on this later, they're referring to a very, very small subset, which is telecom, right? But you have to understand that the bigger government now places additional taxes, right, in this sector. What are they doing? They are taxing not to survive is what is being taxed. And this is something that has to be reviewed. How much taxes can government pay because we depend on it, right, to survive? And I think these are some of the challenges that are
Thank you, Sidi. You made mention of very, I think this is a very important introduction for everybody in the room to understand the situation that we are in as to provide internet for people all the way. And part of the things that he made mention is also Gamtel is the only company that should roll out fiber as far as their core mandate is concerned. But also it becomes a concern for people. We saw some ISPs running fiber within the greater Banjul area. What is happening, CD?
I think that what's happening is that there is some contention within the industry, and I think that probably by the end of this year, a decision will be made either way. What I do know for now is that government has written to all of us saying that you cannot roll out fiber, and if you are rolling out fiber, you should stop. Now, obviously, there's a heated debate happening in terms of what does this actually mean, right? Now, ultimately, government's position is that we have invested, and again, this is the problem. Government took a loan from wherever they took a loan and invested a significant, want to be able to provide infrastructure for Gambians to be able to connect. But the total investment, as I understand it, was about $24 million, right? Now, if you actually now look at the capacity, I make an investment to deploy a base station in Dar es Salaam. I spend $2 million on a base station for 10 people to connect. That's only going to connect 10 people. What is my return on investment? Am I going to get my return in time to actually make a repair on that base station if it falls into disrepair?